All right. As I once mentioned, my grandmother used to say, you can build a radio out of a Quaker Oats box. And I had this one instructor in Reds. And for in the morning we'd have theory, and in the afternoon we'd actually build circuits or bring something in from home and work on it. Well, anyway, this one instructor several times whenever there was a crystal in a circuit, he would say, you can change the frequency of a crystal. And that was it. And I'm like, and I raised my hand. I said, like how? And he goes, I really don't remember. But he did it like 3 times. And I only raised my hand once and asked him how. I let it go by the other 2 times. So that stuck in my mind over the years that basically you can change the frequency of a crystal. Now, when it's in a radio and you're calibrating an oscillator, there's a crystal, there's usually a little capacitor next to it. It's usually in parallel. And you turn it and you can zero beat the oscillator to WWV or whatever. On an ICOM R71A, it's on the bottom, the large knob that you turn. Look on the bottom, you'll see a little hole, and it shows you in the manual. It tells you in the manual. I think you have to be in sideband when you zero beat the main tuning on the R71A to make it accurate. So anyway, the last video I told you about pulling a crystal. The article is called Pulling a Crystal Further. You'll notice the guy's call letters, it's another country. So the crystals he uses are for a slightly different frequency. But that's not what I was concerned about. I wanted to see how much you could get the frequency to vary. Could you get a full like 80 meters in there? No. But what this is good for, now this one here, I got 8 megahertz crystals, 2 of them in parallel. So right now, let's just say it's 8 megahertz and then 730 cycles. Now, if we tune this knob, this is 100 picofarads, if we tune this up, notice it's 800, 900, 1,000, we're getting up there, 2,000, 2,600, 3,000. So you can vary using 2 crystals in parallel. You can get a 3,000 variation. Now you'd say, well, what's that good for? Well, if you get into direct conversion radios or QRP, which is a QRP receiver, which is usually a direct conversion radio and a transmitter using all the same parts. So a direct conversion, you have a little front end, maybe 2 toroid coils. It's a bandpass filter. Say we're doing 80 meters. So you got 2 toroid coils set up to allow 3.5 megahertz to come through the front end into an NE602. Now you're going to need an oscillator. That's where this would be good. You now have, instead of just having a crystal, you have a crystal you can pull. So if you're online and you are not on the air, you're sending code with another person, and you need to move. You don't have to change the crystal. All you have to do is turn the knob and shift the crystal over. All right, that's where it's good. That's what the guy's basically talking. QRP rigs and a direct conversion radio. You got the front end filter, 2 toroid coils into the NE602. Then on the bottom of the NE602, you got some kind of oscillator. So when the oscillator is right next to the frequency of the station you're trying to pick up, it produces a beat note, which is audible. That's why they call it direct conversion. You're not going into an IF, like a 455 IF, then to a detector. You're taking the audio that's produced by the incoming signal against the oscillator. Usually you set it up to get like 1,000 hertz or 1,000 cycles, whichever you like. And that's what direct conversion radios are. And they use it for in QRP rigs. So when you switch between transmit and receive, you're using the same oscillator. The only difference is when you're in receive, there's an extra bit of capacitance to pull the oscillator so it's slightly off frequency. from when you transmit. You in transmit, it's straight oscillator. Then when you go into receive, you shift that oscillator over just a little bit, so you'll get a tone. So instead of getting, you get. That's why direct conversion radios are considered so cool, because you're taking the incoming signal, beating it with an oscillator, and turning it direct into the received signal. Now, direct radio also will do sideband, but it won't do AM. It's not wide enough to give you enough intelligence so you could understand. Now, if you put WWV on a direct conversion radio, you sort of make it out and know what time the guy says. But to listen to an AM broadcast on a direct conversion radio, it's very annoying. But what I wanted to say about this oscillator, it drifts very little, like 1 hertz. The crystal, it basically stays great, even though you're shifting it across. And there's crystal oscillator has less noise, less distortion than some type of synthesized thing. Now, Franklin oscillator, it's got a great sine wave out of it, but it does drift. Now, let's jump to a Drake radio, which I didn't realize until a couple weeks ago. It has a PTO in it, which is instead of having a tuning capacitor, it uses an inductor that tunes, and that drifts 100 hertz from warm up. It drifts 100 up and down. So my Franklin that I built, that went between 2 and 3 megacycles, was drifting. I think after it was warmed up was 50 hertz. So I've gotten really close to getting something that's really, really good. Now, there are some articles that say you can get a regular oscillator to be just as stable as a crystal. I don't know. I haven't done it except with the Huff and Puff. Now, Huff and Puff is an whole other thing. It's like a frequency counter circuit without the digits, and it has an error correction, say output, and you tune it. You tune the frequency in, and what happens is anytime it has a comparator in it, if it's off frequency, it sends a pulse to a varicap, which then has a capacitor across it, which then shifts the frequency back a little bit. So the circuit is constantly monitoring the frequency and making corrections. That's what Huff and Puff does. It's sort of like phase lock loop, but not the same. And there's so many different circuits, but the holy grail would be a variable frequency oscillator that does a wide range, that doesn't drift. And there are people that just spend their hobby building different oscillators, trying to get them to be as good as a crystal, even higher up in frequency. That's what you're bumping into when you're reading about VFOs, variable frequency oscillators. The old tube ones, they would say, oh, this is really good. But back in those days, a drift of 500 hertz was good. Nobody likes that anymore. See, what happens is you go online, you're doing code, and your transmitter's drifting because it's older. And the guy on the other end, if he's a jerk, and there are a lot of them out there, they'll basically, they don't want to talk to you CW-wise because they claim they have to keep following you up and down the band. You know, we're talking 500 hertz, you know, which is within the audio range. And then after your transmitter's on a while, it doesn't drift as much. But there's people that want to have perfection. And then there's people like me that I want the best oscillator with the least amount of parts. And it's the Franklin. And there's Franklins used with tubes. The Franklin's a very unknown oscillator because so many other ones have been drawn up. But there are Franklins, and regulate the voltage to a Franklin if it's transistor. Now the Drake uses a single transistor. I don't know if it's in a metal box. It probably is. It's got a regulator on it, 100 hertz. And that was considered really good. Not anymore. See, people just keep buying better and better equipment, and they don't talk about anything new on the when you're on the air listening to these people, the same subjects they talked about 30 years ago are still the same. How am I coming in? I just got a new antenna. I got this. But the newer thing is politics. And people get nasty with each other, and they throw carriers on each other. But if you're like me, I like building different things. And I told you, if I see something I never built before, or I never saw it work, I build it. And that's what you're seeing. I did, this is the second part of it. And I gave it a reference. It's pulling crystals further. And you put that in the internet, and you'll come right on the guy's page. And like I said, the guys from another country, their bands are a little bit different. They're in a different frequency range than ours. That's why the crystals are a little bit different in frequency. I just happen to have some eights, and that's why I did it. I wanted to see how far I could pull these crystals. All right, and this is two crystals in parallel, 8 megacycle once. We can pull it almost 4,000 cycles. 4, 5, 6. Here we're going. Go for it. Now, dropping back down. All right, so we're talking 3,500 cycles. You can pull an 8 megahertz crystal. I wouldn't have thought that was possible. Like I said, that instructor said you could change the frequency of a crystal. Well, how do you do it? Oh, I don't remember. I think that's it. All right, that's it.